Prime Minister Netanyahu is the longest lasting prime minister in Israeli history. It used to be Ben Gurion, David Ben Gurion, the first prime minister, but he's been put in the shade, Ben Gurion, by Netanyahu. If you read the liberal commentators or commentators in the West, every few months, they're predicting the end of Netanyahu's rule. It doesn't happen because Netanyahu, he is a reflection and a representation of Israeli society. He's an obnoxious, narcissistic Jewish supremacist who thinks that only Jews count in God's grand design. Everybody else, the Goyim, as they're called, they have no place in God's grand design except where Israel decides to situate or place them. So the first fact is, we have to bear in mind, he remains even now very popular in Israel. The claim is his standing up to Iran has increased his popularity, but as a general rule. Number two, Israel is a democracy. Were it true that his policies were unpopular, another candidate would emerge. That's the nature of a democracy. Have you heard of another candidate who has emerged by dissociating himself or denouncing Netanyahu's policies? The answer is no. Number three, it's not just the Israeli state. If you look at the Israeli society, I'm not talking about the people at the helm of the state. The Israeli society overwhelmingly supports the genocidal war in Gaza. It's about 95% of the Jewish Israelis, 95. I have the statistics right here. Even I have to say, I was a little astonished when I read the latest numbers. Let's see. About 60% of Israeli Jews oppose any humanitarian aid to Gaza. But that's the question of the aid. I'm talking about the war. Let's see. Give me 1/2 second. Here, impose on the issue of the war. On this issue of the war, only 1.8%, that was in October, 7%, that was in December, and 3.2%, that's January, of Jewish Israelis believed the IDF was using too much firepower in Gaza. Do you hear those percentages? As of January, when already it's reaching the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, on charges of genocide, only 3.2% of Jewish Israelis believed the Israeli Defense Forces was using too much firepower in Gaza. So when people want to lay the blame for the insanity on Netanyahu, that is, I don't say it gleefully, I'm simply reporting it objectively. That is a misrepresentation of the facts. If there is no political opposition to be seen against Netanyahu, or substantive, no leader to emerge, it's because the whole population agrees with what Netanyahu is doing. If he were simply doing it, as Western commentators like to say, because the longer the war goes on, the more time it will take for corruption charges to be lodged against him, and so he wants to stay out of jail. If any of that were true, the other Israeli generals and senior officials would simply mount a campaign on those grounds, that he's just trying to protect himself. They're not saying that because they all agree with his policies. We have to be honest about that. They all agree with his policies. That's the problem. It's a lunatic state and a lunatic society. And we should be as free about saying that as we would say about Nazi Germany beginning in around 1943. Now, Nazi Germany, you could say there was extenuating circumstances. What do I mean by that? It was a totalitarian state. It did control all the media. And by 1943, the Germans are clearly beginning to lose the war. And in places like Stalingrad, Leningrad, thousands, if not more than thousands, of German soldiers are freezing to death in the snows, the winter, the Russian winter. And also on the domestic front, there's new privations, deprivations, the restrictions the German government, because it's losing the war, are putting on consumption and things like that. Okay, and the totalitarian German media, Nazi media, are saying it's all the fault of the Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy. It's the Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy, and they're hearing it over and over and over again. So you can understand, I'm not excusing it, I'm just saying factually, you can understand that at some point they've gone crazy and they hate the Jews, and the Jews are causing our soldiers to die in the Eastern Front, and blah, 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 blah. Israel is not a totalitarian state. Israel probably has the highest usage of the web per capita of any country in the world. Now, you could say it's true, the Israeli media are painting a very false picture of what's going on in Gaza. But you're a young man. You know that most young people don't get their information from mainstream media anymore. They get it from the web. Israelis are perfectly aware of what's going on.